afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to our Wednesday lunchtime segment. And as promised, we have a very special guest here today. So we have Pastor Lamont, of course, welcome back, and we have Pastor David Ratton here. David, thank you so much for coming in with us.
A pleasure.
And thank you, wherever you are, thank you for joining in with us. If you're in Swan Hill, you will have had the pleasure of seeing David on Sunday. I will confess, we're doing this with David on the weekend so that he can get back to Melbourne. So thank you for joining in with us, and we hope you'll learn something about David as well. So who is David Ratton? The big question, drum roll for an answer here.
Drum roll.
What can I say? Look, I guess personally, I'm married to Julie. We have 6 children. And we have 9 grandchildren. And one of our daughters-in-law announced just a couple of weeks ago that we're expecting our 10th grandchild. So very excited about that. And as you can imagine, having a large family are very important to us, and we spend a lot of time catching up and keeping up. In terms of ministry, I've been a minister with Churches of Christ in Victoria for the past 33 years. My first church was actually up the river at Mildura, and I was there for 8 years. And in actual fact, when I was at Mildura, I used to catch up with the minister from the Swan Hill Church of Christ. His name was Lindsay Mays, and some of you may even remember Lindsay. So my connection with this church actually goes back quite a long way. What I'm currently doing, having been a local pastor for most of that time, I am now working with Churches of Christ in Victoria and Tasmania, and that is a full-time role.
So tell me, David, what would your role description be?
Well, it's pretty fancy.
Yep.
It's a fancy role description. It's called Community Mission Catalyst. And when I took on the role, I sort of had to sit down and write the definition of what it actually meant. But look, I have a couple of things that I do. Firstly, I spend time helping churches to look at better ways to engage with their community, and particularly in benevolent type programs. I was really excited to hear that you had a hamper program just before Christmas, 450 hampers. That is music to my ears, because that tells me that here is a church that has their community at heart and is actually prepared to put their money where their mouth is when it comes to meeting community need. So that's part of what my role is encouraging churches, hopefully inspiring them and helping them to do that more effectively. And then the other part of my work is to work with ministers and church leadership groups to help them become better at what they do. And particularly when it comes to strategic planning and visioning and just working out who are we before God and what does God have in mind for the future of our church. So I spent a fair bit of time working with churches in that way.
Fantastic. All wonderful stuff.
Yeah. So if David Ratton would one day retire, hopefully not while you're still on fire, what would your end dream, you'd say, oh, I can die happy man now? What would that be?
Wow, what a question. Look, I'll be quite honest. I've often preached a sermon which in a sense asks everyone to answer that question. And I've used the illustration of what do you want on your epitaph? You know, this sort of sums up this person's life. And my namesake in the Bible, David, King David, was described as a man after God's own heart. And I would love to think that a description of my life and my ministry would be a man after God's own heart. And of course, I can't write that for myself, but that would be my aspiration. In terms of my ministry, I would love to think that I have been helpful to pastors and churches to become more what God intended them to be. And that's what my work involves now. And I'd love to get to the end of my time and look back and think, yeah, I think I've helped pastors, I've helped churches to be more what God intended them to be.
Yeah. Now, David, we see your heart, we hear your heart, and that's also important to us because that's also part of your visit to us here at the Grain Shed in Swan Hill. I know Jody has some itching questions with regard to vision and mission, and we have spoken a lot about that. Jody, what are those questions you want to ask?
Well, what is it? What is it that you're trying to help us through? What is the mission and what is the vision that we're looking at, and how can that help as a church?
They're interesting words, and they're words that we often throw around, that a church should have a mission, should have a vision, and a lot of people think they're interchangeable terms. They're not actually. The mission of a church is a very simple statement about answering the question, what? What are we supposed to be doing? And an example of a mission statement, if you like, from the Bible would be what Jesus gave to the disciples when he said, go and go into all the world, preach the gospel, make disciples, baptise, and so on. That's their mission, that's their mandate, and it's an overarching statement of what we are meant to be doing. And I'm encouraging the church at Grain Shed to have a rethink about what is our mission. It's good every few years to sit down and imagine what a really good mission statement would be for your church. Now, the vision, on the other hand, is actually a picture of a preferred future. It's sort of looking ahead and praying and asking God, show us what you want our church to look like in the future. And so when you go through a visioning process, you come up with statements like, we see. This is what we see. And it might describe physical buildings, it might describe ministry, it might describe mission, it might describe your interaction with your community, but it's actually some statements about the sort of church we see in the future. And that's the sort of thing that I'm hoping to help your leaders to do, is to work through a mission and a vision statement for your church.
Beautiful. Yeah.
No, we are thankful for that, David. Really thankful. If you talk about you do that with us at the Grain Shed, would there be any other churches? How many other churches would you also be doing that, or is it just our church?
No, not just your church. There's probably 4 or 5 churches at the moment that I'm currently working with, and going through a very similar process. As I said before, I don't care which church you talk about. There should be, on a regular basis, an opportunity for the leaders and the people of the church to think through what their God-given vision is for their future. And therefore, really, every church I speak to, if they're interested, I talk about visioning and I talk about mission and what it might look like to recalibrate, refocus and redirect energy for the future.
Okay. Maybe just a question. I haven't prepared you on this question, but I want to ask you, in your discussion with churches, have you found that COVID and this last year that we've been through, a different year, that it kind of woken up a lot of churches to revision, remission, rethink church a bit?
Well, it's really interesting because it's actually a classic example of churches, in fact, not choosing to change or choosing to have a new vision or even a new mission. They were forced to, all over Australia, actually all around the world. And the churches I'm in contact with, like the Grain Shed, were confronted with some very significant challenges over the last 12 months. And as a result, they revisioned. They started, how do we reach people? How do we reach our own people? What does online look like? What does a Wednesday on
lunchtime look like?
At lunchtime look like? So yes, you're absolutely right. And I guess what my heart would be, Lamont, is that churches not wait to be forced to vision and to change, but to take the initiative and to think, what is God calling us to? Let us sit down and think through what it is that we need to shift, not because we are forced to, but because we believe that's where God wants us to be.
Yeah. And that's something that we look at ourselves as individuals, and so it's natural really that we should be looking at it corporately as a church.
Absolutely. You know, the church and its future begins with me. It's an individual responsibility. And then there's this corporate sense that if together
Yeah.
we're available to God, then there's a preferred future. There's this wonderful future that is in the mind of God that we just need to connect into.
Yes, and if you look at how the church grew in the first century, they were all just individual people, but with God behind them. I mean, it was amazing, and we can still do that now.
They changed the world.
They did,
changed the world.
yeah.
They did, yes. Well, David, it was wonderful having you here with us this afternoon, and I'm so thankful for the opportunity of having an astute man like you, having been through the mill, having gone through lots of times in different churches, re-envisioning, revisiting the vision, the mission of the church, see the core values, helping your help of other people or other people helping you, creating a strategy how you can put that mission and that vision into practice and see how it becomes fulfilled, feel that God has given you something and there's a good way, a plan that you put in place to reach that end goal. And I'm thankful for you and your ministry. I'm also thankful that in the next couple of months here at the Grain Shed we can walk a journey together, even if it's sometimes just on Zoom.
Yep.
I believe God has some good stuff for us here at the Grain Shed, and my prayer is also for you guys to experience that same thing, that exciting vibe in our church, the move of the Spirit of God working in our congregation, working in your hearts, making you excited for what lies ahead here at the Grain Shed. Maybe you are in another church watching this. Maybe this could be the catalyst for you to speak to your pastor and say, Pastor, so where are our church heading? That people can rethink and revisit where they are at and just seek God's heart for what he wants to see happen in your church. So we are thankful that you've joined us today. I'm thankful for Pastor Jody being here, Pastor David. And my prayer is that you will have a wonderful week and that God will bless you being active in the kingdom and enjoying being a child of God. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
All right.